Jen Aranye is an artist from the United States. She mainly does illustration. Here's a coloring book that she created. Jen also creates paintings, does photography, and does graphic design work where she creates logos for companies. Sometimes these companies use these for their Snapchat filters. Here are some examples of the paintings that she creates. You can tell from these paintings that she is very inspired by nature and geometric shapes. Jen is still creating today. Today we're going to make some artwork inspired by Jen Aranye. First, we need to make a really big geometric shape. You could choose whatever geometric shape you'd like. A square, triangle, rectangle, any of those would be fine. I grabbed my ruler so that I can have a nice straight line, and I created a really big triangle. This should take up most of your paper, so we have a lot of room to work with. Now I grabbed a pencil, and towards the middle of my shape, I'm creating my mountains. Once I have the general shape of my mountains, I'm going to make the shadows for all of the mountains by drawing a wavy line from the bottom point of my mountain all the way to the top point of my mountain. And I'm going to do this for every single mountain I have. In front of the mountains, I'm going to draw some pine trees by drawing a straight line with some upside down V's going down that line. Now you can make as many pine trees as you'd like, but I'd like you to try to make at least one. You can make these different heights too. I think that makes it look really interesting. Once everything's drawn in pencil, grab a thin Sharpie or a pen and go over all of your pencil lines. Now for the mountain shadows, we're going to be using hatching and cross-hatching. Hatching is when you use lines repeated over and over and over again in an area to create shadow. Now to make this shadow look really, really dark, you're going to put the lines really close to each other. To have a medium darkness, make sure you space them just a little bit more, and to have them light, you're going to space them out a lot. Now that I've drawn them all, you can really see the difference between the dark, medium, and light hatching. Now let's move on to cross-hatching. Cross-hatching is just like hatching, but instead of just the straight lines, you're going to have some lines that are going one way, and then you're going to cross over these lines by going the opposite way on top. The same way with hatching, where when you want it to be really dark, you put them really close to each other. You're going to do that same thing with cross-hatching, making sure all of your lines are really, really close to each other. And then as you want to lighten up, you're going to space these lines a little bit more. Now you can see the difference between hatching and cross-hatching. You can choose one of these for all of your mountain shadows, or you could do some of your mountains in hatching and some of your mountains in cross-hatching. That's up to you. For my mountains, I decided that I wanted to do cross-hatching and that I wanted to make my shadows look really, really dark. So I'm trying to put my lines close to each other. If you think it's helpful to use a ruler for this part, you can use that. I went straight for Sharpie. If you'd like to practice first with pencil and go on top of it with the Sharpie, you can. But if you think that you could just go straight to Sharpie, you can do that for this part. Now once I was done hatching everything, I noticed that a lot of my lines were kind of poking outside of that main line for my shadow. So I'm going over that line again, trying to make it look a little bit more neat. Now for this last part, we're going to make the sky with watercolors. And we're going to be using Analogous Colors for this because they mix the nicest. Now I'm starting by just putting down water in the area where my sky is. This is going to help spread the watercolors a little bit more easily. Then I'm going to pick my Analogous Colors. Remember, analogous colors are 3 colors that are right next to each other on the color wheel. I'm starting by just dotting the colors onto the page. Then once I have them all on there, I can take a clean brush and kind of blend them together however I'd like. While my paper is still really wet, I decided to try this technique where I took a dry paper towel, crumpled it up, and dabbed it on top of the wet areas. This can sometimes give you a cloudy effect in your sky. You may have to grab a couple different dry pieces of paper towel to do this. Now don't worry about getting watercolor outside of your shape because we're going to be cutting this out. But try your best to not get it messy inside of your mountains because we're going to leave those bright white. Now we're going to let this completely dry overnight. We don't want this to be wet at all when we cut it out. We're going to cut it out and glue it to a black piece of paper. If you're at home and you have colorful pieces of paper, you could grab a black piece of paper and glue it onto there, or you could grab another color. If you don't have any colorful pieces of paper, you could grab a white piece of paper, decorate it however you'd like, and glue this down to it.